Hi everyone, welcome to another coffee break with Kardec. And again, we were talking about the book Genesis by Allan Kardec. And we'll also talk about God, just picking up from our last coffee break and then bringing some ideas of God that were very important and which were at the very beginning of book Genesis. It's important to understand God and to have a clear picture of what God is, especially based on the teachings from the Spirits compiled by Allan Kardec, because then it's easier to understand the creation once we understand not the Creator itself, as we are going to see. And I said, yes, itself, because Kardec asks the Spirit in the first question in the Spirit's book, what is God? Not who is God. Because when we question someone who, we are referring to a human being, a person. And because our vocabulary is rich, our languages are very poor, so it's either who or what. And in this case, what is God? Just to show us that we shouldn't have a preconceived idea that God is human, is just like us. So, question, what is God? And then based on that, the answer that the spirits give, God is the supreme intelligence, the first cause of all things. All things. Everything that exists has been created by God. Known or not by us, it's been created by God. It's the creation of God. And we also shouldn't take God by its creation. The creation is one thing, God is something else apart from the creation. Okay, so the idea that we have, personal idea that we have, or collective idea that we make of what God is of course in accordance to our level of evolution, intellectually speaking and morally speaking. So there are basically two ways that we can create this idea, or have our own idea, conception of what God is, based on previous experiences, our experiences, the experiences of others, and of course, studying, analyzing, and through our senses as well, we develop this idea, this concept of what God is. It's something sometimes very personal, but there's, of course, a general concept of what God is, which is in accordance to the level of humanity. But also some information that were brought by the Spirit. So it's not the fruit of our perception, the ideas that have evolved through time, but actually ideas that were brought from outside, from the Spirit, outside inverted commas, because that was actually limited to the capacity of us, the spirits, while in a physical body, which are much more limited than when we are in the spiritual world. But what they brought to us is also limited, because our capacity of understanding is limited, our intelligence is limited, our moral development is limited. So when are we going to have a clear idea of what God is? When we become pure spirits. And because we are far away from that, but on that way, not there yet, we still only have a partial perception of what God truly is. But there is a way through which we can create a framework where everything will make sense or not related to God and the creation and us, the spirits as such, is the attributes of God. So we can understand the attributes of God. And these attributes won't change as we evolve. They will be refined. So one big attribute today for us, with a limited perception that we have, will stay there, but will be more detailed. So our understanding will be much broader of each one of these attributes, but they won't change. Otherwise, the God that the concept of God that we have will change. No, it's limited at the moment, but it won't change. So reasoning is a tool that we have that will allow us to understand or increase this understanding that we have of what God is. And of course, the attributes we need to understand the creation. And I'll give you an example why understanding the attributes of God is like setting a toolbox and making sure we get the right tools. And then those tools will be necessary to work with whatever we have. A car engine, for instance, we need to get the right tools so we are sure that there is not one single screw there that we won't be able to change with the tools that we have. So to understand at the level that we are in perfect spirit, to understand the attributes of God, not even what God is, but the attributes, as I said, we need then to understand exactly these attributes. And let's take the idea of hell. We've received through different religions the idea of hell, the place for eternal punishment. And when we set these attributes that the spirits brought to us and try to understand what hell doesn't make sense at all. Because hell is a place for eternal punishment. And we are going to see that the attributes of God won't allow eternal punishment. So, if won't allow eternal punishment, whoever conceived this idea of eternal punishment in a place like hell was actually mistaken. God is all mercy, justice. Can you imagine? Let's take an example. We are very good at making cakes, but our cakes, they have to be perfect. No bumps, no holes, no nothing. They have to be perfect. And so we bake a cake, and the chances of something going slightly wrong is great. So what are you going to do? Going to throw in the bin? We make the cake, you say, well, it's not exactly what I want. I'll throw it in the bin. So we make 100 cakes, and 99 out of 100 are not exactly that perfect as we expect. Just one, perhaps. We throw 99. What a waste of resources. What a waste of time. So would God create us knowing that we are imperfect? We haven't been created perfect. Although God is perfect, is the most perfect something that we can ever conceive, and would create us just to throw most of us in hell, because we will make a mistake one day or another, and a great mistake, a small mistake, we are going to be in hell forever. It doesn't make sense at all. So we see that this idea of eternal punishment, and that is very much clarified in the Spirit's book, question 1009. We have, including some spirits giving us some messages, this idea of God, the God that punishes. And I'll talk about punishment again when we understand the attributes of God. If God is perfect in one attribute, there is no room for one single mistake or different behavior regarding that attribute. God is all just. He's pure justice. He can be unjust one single time. Otherwise, he's not God, because God is perfect in that. So you see the importance of having the right attributes of God, and these attributes are not ours. They were brought by spirits, compiled by Allan Kardec for us to understand the creation. So we see, for instance, that God is supreme and sovereign intelligence. God is pure intelligence, because it has to be like that, because if there is something or someone more intelligent than God, then our God is not God, but there's this other one. So we see that God has to be the maximum that we can conceive in everything. God is eternal. If God had been created, because there is no effect without a cause, so the cause of the creation of God was something else or someone else. That would be God, and not this one that has been created at this point in time. You see what I mean? So we would have to go further back in time. And then if this other God had been created by something else, so this wasn't our God, but the one that had been created before. So we go infinitely in that direction. So God has to be infinite, was never created, and is eternal, will never end. We have been created at one point because we are the creation of God, but we'll be eternal. We won't cease to exist, no longer. God is immutable. Can you imagine God changing? And all the laws all of a sudden will be different. And then let's take a law in the physical world, gravity. Can you imagine then Newton sitting under the apple tree, and instead of the apple falling into his head, he would actually, be lifted up and hit the apple while it's still on the tree. So God has to be immutable, because if God changes, that is because there is room for changing. And if there is room for changing, perhaps there is something else which is less mutable than this one that we thought was God. And that one is God and not this one. And then we go into that search. We'll see that we are finding the ultimate God, which is our God, the God that the Spirit brought to us. Immaterial. If God was material, and matter is undergoing transformation all the time, matter is part of the creation. So the Creator is not material. Is all powerful. Because if God is not all powerful, there is something else or someone else who is more powerful than this God. So that one is God. And then we go after someone even more powerful because there's room for that. If he's not the ultimate power, there's always someone or something which is more powerful than this one we think is God, but it's not. And supremely just and good. And that I want to stop here and remember the example I gave about hell. If God is just, if God is good, completely good, supremely good, infinitely good, how come one day God is vengeful? How come one day God is jealous? How come one day God is angry? It's not possible at all. God will never be, because he's supremely good. So this idea of God punishing, and this was actually a great mistake, because God, as I said, is supremely good and supremely just. So who is someone who is supremely good and supremely just would condemn us, create us imperfect, and condemn us for being imperfect into a hell to suffer for eternity? Doesn't make sense, does it? Infinitely perfect, as we said before. So the infiniteness of a quality excludes the possibility of the existence of the opposite quality that will lessen or now the quality that we've seen. So God is the maximum that exists in everything, eternal. He's supremely good, supremely just, all powerful. So there's nothing beyond that. And for us who are accustomed to a world that is limited in terms of space, we need a 3D space, three-dimensional space. We need time. So all our understanding in the physical world is based on that, to understand something that is so above us, so supreme, so great, is very difficult at the moment. That's why the spirits said that they brought to us the attribute, not the understanding of what God is. We have no elements. It's like a small frog trying to swallow a whale. It's impossible. God is so great. It's so great that at the point that we are, we have no elements to understand, or even scratch the full understanding of what God is. But we can, of course, have an idea of the attributes. And as I said before, the idea of these attributes, they are going to be refined as we progress. They won't change. So this is the main point that the edifice or the universe rests. So we have to use this to check if something makes sense according to these attributes or not. And I tell you, if it doesn't make sense within this framework, so we discard it because it's probably untrue. And as I said to you, this idea of eternal punishment or a God that is jealous, vengeful, and so on doesn't make sense at all because God is pure love. The creation, including us, is the result of God, of His love. So that's what I had for today for a coffee break. I've basically finished my coffee, and before we finish here, I just want to point out that you can leave your message here on YouTube. Leave your message there. Give us a like if you do like this coffee break, and hope to see you next week for another coffee break with Kardec. Thank you so much.